Okay. Now, one of the things that people try to do once they've been able to compromise a system is to actually try and crack some passwords, and that's what we're going to do today. The next activity that we're going to try and do is we're going to try and crack some passwords. This involves exfiltrating or getting data out of the system. Infiltrating, breaking into, exfiltrating, taking out of. And we're going to try and exfiltrate some data from this system. Now, technically, this is more of a password audit because you need root access, like we have here, to gain access to the encrypted passwords that run on these systems by design. You don't want anybody seeing the passwords because, as you'll see in a minute, if you can see the password hashes and they're not done very well, you can crack those password hashes, and that's exactly what we're going to do next. So, I have my session running here. I'm going to start trying to create a structure for my work. So again, I've got my tabs running across the top. This is my initial scans. This is my attack tab right now. I'm going to open up a third tab and I'm going to actually make some directory. So before I start trying to crack the passwords, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory structure for my work files. So I've opened up a new tab across the top here, and in this tab I'm going to actually create a directory for my work files. I do that with the mkdir command. In the directory, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Metasploitable, because that is the name of the server I am attacking, and that's how I organize my work when I'm doing these kinds of activities. The mkdir is a Unix command to make a directory, and we've made a directory called Metasploitable. We want to now go into that directory. We do that with the cd command. That stands for change directory. So we're going to change directory into Metasploitable. Now, like we used the tab before, I get to the SP and I hit tab and it auto-completes for me. And I can see now that I am in my Metasploitable directory. Perfect. If I do an ls, the directory is empty, as expected. So what I want to start doing is I want to start capturing some of the data from this website. I'm going to minimize my browser because I really don't need that right now. We'll come back to that later. But I want a text editor. I want to take a look at, we're going to use the cat command. If you scroll down in the section of cracking passwords, you'll see that we do a couple of times this cat command. All right, I'm just going to hit enter to give myself a little delineation so it's easier for you to read my commands. And I'm going to type in the following: cat /etc/passwd. This is the file that contains all of the user information and, coincidentally, not the passwords. It used to have the passwords in it, but as you can see, if you can see those password hashes, you can crack them. And everybody needs to see this file to log into a Unix system, specifically a Linux system in this case. So they move the passwords to a different file that no one can see. But we can see this file, we can start our attack. And if you take a look here, we've got a large collection of users. Everybody starting from root, the most powerful account in the system, it's often user ID 0. All the way down to the bottom where I've got the 4 main characters from South Park added to the system: Cartman, Kenny, Kyle, and Stan. Okay, we're going to copy all of that off of our target machine and we're going to copy that over to our Kali. So how do we do that? Well, if you go to applications, under accessories, you should see LeafPad. Select LeafPad at this time, and we are going to copy paste our content. So again, we're going to go back to our terminal. If you haven't already done so, type in the cat etc password. The cat command, I should mention, stands for concatenate. It's a complicated thing, but the long story short, it's designed to put two files together and produce a third file. And if you don't use it properly, it just dumps the results of one file onto the screen, which is handy for most Unix people who want to take a look at the contents of a file. And that's what we're doing here. We're looking at the contents of the etc password file, and it returns all of this. Once I have that, you don't need the blank line at the bottom. You only need right up to the bottom of Stan's line. You can go Edit, Copy. You can go over to LeafPad, Edit, Paste. And now you have exfiltrated the usernames from your target system. We are going to File, Save, and we are going to save that in our pentest directory, in our Metasploitable directory. Okay? So again, we're going to save that in our pentest directory, in our Metasploitable directory. And you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it passwd.txt because that was the name of the file. It was the password file, so I'm just going to call it password.txt, and I'm going to save that. And now I have half the information I need to crack passwords. I'm going to do that again, but this time I'm going to try and look at the password hashes, the encrypted password strings. This is stored in a different file. This file is called the shadow file. cat/etc/shadow. And you know that these are password hashes because you see it starting with string 1 string, string 1 string, string 1 string. It could also be string 2 string, string 5 string, string 6 string. It's just different types of encryptions. These are very old MD5 encryptions, not very secure at all by design. Okay? So we're going to again highlight everything, right down to Stan's password hash, edit, copy, and you could do over here, but I'm just going to open up another LeafPad. Accessories, LeafPad. I'll try and put it in place. I'm going to paste my list of password hashes, File, Save, and I'm going to call this, again, I'm going to go to my pentest directory, my Metasploitable directory, and I'm going to call this shadow.txt because, again, it's the shadow file. And I will save that as well. So I've got two files here. Perfect. Now I can try and crack these. Okay, I'm still in my Metasploitable directory, but because I've saved these files here, when I do an ls, I'm going to do ls-al, we actually see the two files that we created. And they are not that big, 1800 bytes and 1473 bytes. Yours will probably be pretty close to those numbers. Before we can crack them, we have to recreate them back into a format that John the Ripper likes. Now there's a couple of ways again of doing this, but originally, way back in the day, before we had the shadow file, everything was in the password file. And this second column here where it says X, these are what are called colon-delimited files. Each line has a record, as in a record in a table, and each column is kind of delineated or identified by the colon. So in this case, Kenny is the first column, this X is the second column, and that used to contain the password hash. But as you will see in just 1 second, once you have those password hashes, anybody can crack them. It's just a question of time and computer resources. So they moved it off to the shadow, but John the Ripper likes to have that format. Again, there's other ways of doing it, but let's just try and recreate that format as much as possible. And we do that with the unshadow command. We're removing shadow, we're putting it back to the original system. Unshadow, it actually gets installed when you install John the Ripper, which is a password cracking tool we're using. And we're going to unshadow password, tab, all right? Shadow, tab, all right? And we are going to redirect. We're using the greater than symbol, all right? The triangle with the point pointing to the right. We're going to redirect that to a third and a new file. And in the handout, I called it, what did I call it? I called it passwords to crack. .txt. Okay. Do you have to use the underscore? No. But it's so much easier in the Unix world to make sure that you don't use spaces in your file names. The Unix environment, Linux, can handle spaces, but it can be problematic, so we're going to not use spaces in our directory and file names. Okay? So now, when I do an ls-al, I've got a passwords to crack file, which is kind of a merge of both of those files. And like before, I can use the cat command to look at it. ps tab. Oh, tab. Tab is your friend. Passwords to crack. And when you take a look at this file now, any user that had a username and password now has a username and password together, along with everything else that we saw in the password file. So basically, we're taking the password hashes that were separate before and we're putting them back in the same file with the username in a format that John the Ripper likes. Now that we have that, we can simply type in, let's clear the screen so it's a little easier to, all we really need to do now is to type in John and the file that contains the passwords we want to crack. PASSWO tab, passwords to crack. Enter. And John will go through and will try and crack those passwords. And very quickly, we see that John succeeds in cracking so many of these passwords.